Boom. All right. So it is Detroit pan pizza time. And we're going to show you the way that we do our pan pizza. It's pretty traditional. Might be debated with some real professionals. However, we're going to do it the baking steel way because we like to keep things simple and awesome. Detroit pizza, a few things I want to cover first, then we'll get right into it. As far as equipment goes, obviously a baking steel because it stays in the oven, and then the pans. This is like a Detroit pan. We're going to link to this stuff in an email or somewhere in the next few days, but this is called USA pan. It's like a 13 by 18, I think. Is that about right? 13, yeah. In any case, it's a great pan, but really you don't have to have this pan. You can use cake pans. You can use even cast iron pans, round pans, pie pans. You probably want to have straight sides. It's a little bit easier, but these aren't necessary, but the principle is. So get a pan, keep it well oiled. We'll link to what we think is awesome for these. But first we're gonna make the dough. I'm gonna get right into this today. We'll pause a few in between making the dough and making the pizza for questions. But first let's get into the dough. Like all of our stuff, we try to keep things simple. So what we've done is we're using our 72-hour dough to make the pan pizza, which is 70% hydrated. It's a 3-day dough. It's awesome. You don't have to do 3 days. You could pause this at 24 hours and use it if you'd like. But we've kind of come up with a formula to make one really good batch of dough. And I'm going to show you guys what we have. It's our bread flour, it's salt, it's yeast, and it's water. That's it. For the ingredients, we measured everything with our scale. Again, it's really important. If this is the first time watching one of our videos, all of our doughs are measured in grams. So it's mandatory that you use a digital scale to nail down these ingredients. So we get the scale. So for the flour, we're using bread flour. And flour is more abundant now. You can find what you need in the stores. For our Detroit style, we like a really strong, like high gluten dough. So we're using a bread flour. This is an organic flour from Central Milling, but any of yours, like King Arthur flour, works beautifully. So let's make this dough and we'll get right into it. All I'm gonna do is take my, should I do the salt and the water again? Let's do that. First things first, I'm gonna take my salt and just pour it into my water and just kind of whisk it up. This dissolves. This is something new we've been doing just because it helps to separate the yeast and the salt. So there's no confusion. This doesn't kill the yeast. So we dissolve that first. I'm actually gonna get a dry, actually it doesn't matter. Dry my whisk quick. Put my yeast, which is 1.5 grams, right into my flour. And I have 600 grams of flour here. And all I'm gonna do is whisk this together. The skill level of this dough is a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10. All right, so once I've got that done, I'm gonna whisk my yeast one more time. I'm sorry, whisk my salt and my water before I pour it in. And now what I'm gonna do is just take a spoon and mix this up. I wanna get the water distributed amongst the flour because it's not too liquidy, and then I'm gonna dump it out and put it right on my countertop here. Remove this out of here. And we used 600 grams of flour. We used 425 grams of water and 20 grams of sea salt and 1.5 grams of active dry yeast. And this will make a total of about 1,100, close to like what, 1050 total weight, which is, we find perfect for the size pan that we're using. And you can be flexible there. Sometimes I just have for today, we just had some leftover dough that we used and pressed it out in our pan. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. All I'm doing now is I'm kneading, which means I'm combining the flour and the water together. These bench scrapers really come in handy to kind of get underneath. And I'm pressing with the heel of my hand just to remove any of the dry clumps that might be inside the flour and the water. If this is my first few times doing this, I might put a timer on myself, and I'll knead for about 2 minutes, maybe 3. You can't really overdo it. That's a question we get a lot. Can I overmix it? You know, when you're doing it by hand, you're not going to be able to overmix it really. So I'm just pressing. You can see it's formed one nice ball of dough now. I'm just assuring myself that there's no clumps. Scraping, okay? And when I get to be one big mass and it's starting to get sticky, that's kind of my tell that this thing's done. I'm going to take this, place this ball right back into the container. And I love these containers. These are Cambros. What I love about them, I can just put them, I can put a lid on it, which I have right here. I put my lid on. And now I'm going to take this lid. I'm going to leave it at room temperature for the next, actually until bedtime. So that for me is going to be about 9 or 10 hours. After 9 or 10 hours, I'm going to take this dough and put it into the fridge for 2 more days. So today is Wednesday. So by Friday or Saturday, I'll remove this and make my pan pizza. If I only have 24 hours, I will still keep it at room temperature for 8 to 10, put it in the fridge before I go to bed. And tomorrow, after 24 hours, I can remove it and make my pan pizza. We like to give it at least 24 hours, and then we've got some really tasty dough. Minimum of 24, up to 3, 4, or 5 days. We just keep it in the same container throughout. And that's probably a really good place to pause for a second and get to some questions, if we have any.
What size is that container?
This is a 2-quart container. So this will hold, this dough, you can see, it's almost half full. It'll expand, and in fact, that'll be almost maxed out. This might blow the lid off, right? But it'd be perfect, actually.
When do you ball up the dough?
That's a great question. So for pan pizza, I will ball this entire mass of dough the day of baking. So in fact, 2 or 3 days later, maybe, right?
Can you confirm the ingredients of the dough?
So we have, in this specific batch, we have 600 grams of bread flour, organic, 425 grams of filtered water, 20 grams of sea salt, and 1.5 grams of active dry yeast.
What size is the pan that you're using?
That's another great question. So the pan that we're using today, this is a big one. This is 13 by 9, I'm sorry, 9 by 13. So 9 this way and 13 long. It's big, a big pan. In fact, I've used anywhere from 1,500 grams of dough to 800 grams of dough in these containers. Today, that batch we just made is about 1,100 grams of dough. And that's a good amount to fit in here. And that's gonna be, on a medium size of thickness. You can make them thicker, you can make them less thicker. Really depends on how much dough you have and what you're looking to do. And also depending on the pan. We're gonna probably cover up, about a quarter, probably about 1/2 inch of dough throughout this pan, and shortly. Really? Yeah.
Water temp?
Water temp, great question, is room temperature. It's the same, because I'm leaving this out at room temperature for the next 12 hours. It's going to get there anyway, so I might as well start at room temperature. I don't want to start hot or cold, so we keep it at room temp.
Lid closable?
Lid closed the entire time. Yes, good question. Do I keep the lid
Is that
closed?
one pizza?
This will be one pan pizza. Yes. If you don't have a lid, saran wrap or just make it airtight is fine.
Why do you switch to cold fermentation?
That's another great question. Why do I switch to cold fermentation? So we do the first, call it 12 to 24 hours at room temperature. If we prolong that at room temperature, this is going to take on a really sour-y taste and not be almost too much. By putting it in the refrigerator, it actually slows down the fermentation process. So it won't be as aggressive. It won't take on so much of that alcohol and sour taste. And it's almost like the perfect amount of, it's a perfect temperature to ferment dough at. We found for 2 or 3 days or 4 days.
The temperature of water, you said it was room. I thought you needed a specific temperature for the yeast to work.
Okay, that's a great question. Someone asked, the temperature in order for that yeast to kind of bloom and wake up. Some recipes will hydrate. Some recipes will call it, to put your yeast, sprinkle the yeast in the warm water and let it bubble up for 10 minutes. But we have found when you're doing these longer ferments that really it's almost an unnecessary step. You just kind of keep your ingredients separate, your salt and your yeast, and kind of whisk them in. That's why I dissolve the yeast first in the water, the salt first in the water. I just dissolved it and just kind of kept it separate. Then I combine them. That seems to work. In fact, I've made this dough, 1,000 times, more than 1,000 times, and not once has my yeast not activated.
How do you measure that small amount of yeast?
Actually, one time. I think one time, right? Great question. How do I measure a small amount of yeast? And, you have 2 scales. You have your typical gram scale. This is from my way. And then to really dial in a small amount of yeast, we find these micro scales to come in really handy, because if any of you have seen, for example, yeast, we use 1 gram. Those yeast packages, I don't have any here. They're these foil packages everyone has seen, probably about this big, and they are 2 1/4 teaspoons or 9 grams. We're taking this batch and dividing it by 9ths. So 1 gram is a really small amount. So we recommend the only way to dial that in is with these micro scales. And these can get down to the 1/100th of a gram, which is pretty fine, pretty amazing. You might find these on college campuses.
Is there any difference between like the 72-hour dough and the Detroit dough, or is it more of a size thing? Size of dough.
Yeah, it's the same ingredients. It's the same formula. We actually just added a little bit. Actually, no, we didn't add anything. We just made a bigger batch. It is the same. I think traditionally it might have a little less water in it, but we're not with tradition here. We're with simplification of our recipes, and we find that this recipe is awesome.
If doing a 24-hour version, do you need more yeast?
Good question. If I'm doing more than a 24-hour, or if I'm only doing a 24-hour fermentation, do I need more yeast? I might sneak a 0.5 gram inside. Like instead of 1 gram, I might use 1.5 or 2 grams. But to answer that question, no, I don't think you need it. No.
Brands of your scales.
This is a brand called My Way, MYWEIGH. We can link to this with you guys on a follow-up email or our blog post. Available on Amazon, I think exclusively. And the micro scale is just called Digital Scale. It's a brand called Salter, SALTER. Good brand. I've had both of these, by the way, for years. And they're awesome.
Here in the Philippines, room temperature is about 84 degrees. What is your suggestion for length of time to bubble?
Ooh, so here in the Philippines, the room temp is 84 degrees. I want to go there.
Yeah.
I like that. I might just reduce that to 4 hours at room temp, and then if you have refrigeration, just stick it in the fridge for the. I mean, I hope your refrigeration is the same temp, right? So maybe 4 or 5 hours at room temp, and then the refrigerator.
Thoughts on non-stick pans?
on the pipe, on the,
Yeah,
on the
like
Detroit pan. So this is actually, I think this is a coated pan. I'm not
just anything.
anodized aluminum, maybe. I'm not even sure, to be honest. It's definitely it's a really smooth finish on it. We use a lot of oil to help this thing not stick, and I would recommend the same. Most pans for pies and cakes are naturally non-stick, aren't they? They're kind of coated anyway.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're good. All right, a little coffee break. Let's get to right to the pizza. This is the fun part. Please do a quick Zamboni. My work area. So for the pan pizza, with one thing I'm missing out is the dough ball. We're gonna take the dough after 3 or 4 days, and I don't have an extra dough, but we're gonna make a ball out of this. So in other words, we're just gonna fold it like we do our dough balls. Just kind of fold it together, that mass, and we're gonna place it right directly in this pan, or a pan like this. I like to use a good amount of olive oil underneath. You can see it's a big dough. I've kind of coated the bottom with the oil, and I placed that dough seam side down right into the pan. And I did this morning at like 7 or 6 o'clock this morning, and just put it in the pan and let it kind of proof and spread out naturally, right? And then it's ready. So this dough has essentially been resting for 4 hours. And I recommend that before you make your pizza, this dough gets to room temp. It's actually funny, it's almost there. It's almost room temp. But it's ready to rock and roll. Okay, so oil it down. And now we're gonna build the pizza. And I'm gonna do my best to kind of, is that a good picture for you guys to see? Can you see that okay?
Sorry, I'm listening to it.
Oh.
That's my protein percentages.
Oh. Is that okay there?
Yeah.
You guys see? Oh, that's probably better right there, right? Okay. I've got the dough, and to really spread this out, I'm just going to kind of just press it in with my fingers. It looks really cool when I do that. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'm just kind of pressing it out into the corners. And as far as the bubbles go, I'm going to actually pop the bubbles, which I don't normally do, but for this one, we don't want it to rise too much. So I'm going to pop the bubbles in this dough. You can see it's really easy to spread out now because it's been sitting for so long. You guys see that? It's cool, right? Oops. All right, so now once I get my dough pressed out and my bubbles popped, get the best view there. And it's kind of all the way to the corners. I'm gonna add my pepperoni first, right?
No.
We're gonna do some pepperoni. We've got about 4 ounces of pepperoni here. And I literally, there's, again, no skill here. Just gonna place it down. It's aggressive on the pepperoni, I know. However, that's what makes it pretty awesome. Any bubbles you see, pop them, okay? I'm gonna save a little bit of the pepperoni for afterwards, and I'll show you why shortly. The order of this, I don't know if it matters that much, to be honest. Kind of do what you feel, but we're just doing it this way. Getting those bubbles popped, all right? The cheese is a low moisture mozzarella. So my recommendation is go to your deli counter and have them cut out blocks of cheese for you. Like a half pound would look about an inch thick maybe. And then just cut it into cubes. And now I'm gonna do is take these cubes, and it's gonna look like a lot of cheese, and it is. Just place them all over. Is that a good picture? Can you see okay there?
You can see almost the whole thing.
Okay, great. Again, it's a lot of cheese. Yeah, okay. And I'm gonna press this, bring the cheese all the way to the edge, right? Yeah, good. It almost reminds me a lot of making like a lasagna. Just kind of layering in flavors, which is pretty awesome. Okay, and just make sure I'm gonna press it in this a little bit, make sure that the dough is all the way to the edges. Can you guys see that? Looks pretty amazing. For the sauce, I'm using a can of San Marzanos with some sea salt added in. That's it. And now traditionally, I think they're gonna cook the sauce maybe first, but we're not traditionalists here. I'm gonna lay the sauce down in rows, just like this, like stripes, right? This takes about a half a can of sauce, I'd say, probably, right? It's amazing. Right, so you can see the 3 stripes of sauce. Now I'm gonna go back with my pepperoni. I'm gonna kind of layer it in between the sauce for fun. That's pretty much it. Okay, and now, what's that? This is it. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put this in the oven on my baking steel. It's been preheating for an hour, and at 450, I'm gonna take this literally. You guys wanna see this? Place this right in on the bottom rack. My oven's at 450 degrees. I'm gonna bake that for 1 hour. No, I'm sorry. I'm losing my mind. I preheated for an hour. I'm gonna bake that for maybe 25 minutes at 450 degrees. And that cheese and sauce, everything's gonna melt. It's gonna be awesome. Now, because we're doing class, we actually made one of these already. It's still really hot. But you can see, boom. You see that, Chef? Mm-hmm. That good? It's still warm in the pan. This thing baked for about 20, 25 minutes, and it's ready to devour. If anything, I probably use a little too much dough in here, but who's gonna complain about this, right? So it's hot, so be careful. And that's pretty much the Detroit style pan pizza. And feel free to kind of layer it with sausage, peppers, you name it, your favorite ingredients. If you're using raw sausage, it's gonna cook. It's cooking it for 20 minutes, so you're fine. The cheese, you can be flexible on the type of cheese that you use or the pepperoni, but the principle is all gonna be the same. And it's awesome. And you can literally cut this. This is like a meal in itself. We'll probably show some pictures of this after we remove it when it cools off for you guys to see the awesomeness. Really good, yeah. Let's get to some more questions.
How much cheese?
We used 6 ounces?
6 ounces.
Yeah, we actually literally filled one of these things up with cubes. So it was half pound. It was a lot of cheese, a lot more than I normally would use.
Crushed tomatoes, whole tomatoes.
These were San Marzano, crushed tomatoes, and I only added salt. That's it. So I added about maybe 10 grams of sea salt to it. Just mixed it up. That was my recipe.
Do you use the broiler or just straight bake and convection?
Great question. I definitely use convection. I always use convection for my cooking. I do not adjust the temperature. I did this at 450 degrees using convection, and I baked it for 25 minutes or so. Cheese.
Can you do a whole wheat version?
Yeah, but if I'm going to use whole wheat, I will substitute in for the flour 20% of whole wheat into the flour mixture, and that'll give me kind of a more nutty dough.
What's the difference between this and Sicilian pizza?
You might get me on that one. I'm not quite sure. I think it's Sicilian. I always looked at doing those in the half sheet tray pan. I just think it's a different. I still use oil underneath it. I think it's this. I think officially, this is a Detroit, because in Detroit, I think it was from
it was an oil pan.
Oil pan from the car manufacturers, or right, they would use their oil pans for all their nuts in, or whatever. And that's how we got to these. This is technically a Detroit style pan. So that really, it's just a brand of pizza, but you could make it in a sheet tray. I guess you just can't call it a Detroit then.
Or grandma's or something.
Yeah.
What oven rack is it still on?
Bottom. Any reason for that? No. It was easier for me to put it in that way. I've got steels on every rack, so for me, it was just the bottom one. And I'm not using the broiler, so I didn't need to be close to the broiler.
Do you ever have issues with gas buildup on a multi-day ferment with using a sealed Cambo?
The question is, do I ever have an issue with gas buildup for a multi-day ferment? Not when it gets cold. If I left it at room temperature, yes. But once it gets cold, that seems to reduce that buildup that you're talking about. And once I ball it up, I'm taking all that gas out of it anyway. So, all right, awesome. So we'll record this. It's going to be on YouTube a little later and Facebook. We're going to try to slice this up and get some cool pictures for you guys to see. It really looks amazing. Thank you guys for being here. We could not do this without you. As always, any questions, please email us at info@bakingsteel.com. We hope that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we love doing these classes with you. So thank you. Bye, guys. Touchscreen.